We will be live. It's preparing the live streaming right now. And it's saying that we are live now.
All right, I'm going to call the select board to order. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
I don't have any, no.
Okay, this is a focused meeting workshop, and the subject is the Island Road project. And I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Hedrick from Gartley and Dorsey to make us
Thank you.
smart.
As you can say, my name is Andrew Hedrick. I'm a civil engineer from Gartley and Dorsey. You can see my screen right now. Quite honestly, we're here to discuss the two areas of Island Road that are both low in elevation and receive regular flooding, both now and in the future are very concerning. So we've been engaged by the town to look at a couple of areas on Island Road to make some improvements. The first area that we have focused on, which I'll call Island Road North, essentially is at the intersection of Village Road and Island Road, right at the shoreline right here. As you can see on my screen, it's right down in this area. It's a few 100-foot section of road that is only a couple of feet above the high water elevation, and it's actually below the regular flood elevation currently. So we've looked at this area, and then we've also looked at an area down here that begins right after Seal Cove Road, and it extends around the corner and all the way to the new bridge. The same thing in this area, the road is low, and they have some issues there. So going back to this first section of road here, this north section, I have a plan that we have prepared. We've been out there, we've conducted a survey, we've evaluated the wetlands, and we've prepared a plan of this area that's accurate. What this plan shows is the road alignment. The Island Road alignment will not be changing through that section, but what we are proposing to do is take the Village Road and change that intersection. Right now, the road kind of meanders into this area through the green shaded section here. As you can see, it's a wide open paved road section, and we're planning and proposing to eliminate that, turn that into more of a grass area to direct vehicles coming off Village Road to more of a traditional intersection with Island Road to slow speeds down and make it a little safer for everybody there. In addition to that, we've added some parking along this section, which we may need to slide around a little bit. We just wanted to put a couple of parking spaces down here so you could have access to Seal Harbor. And we've also incorporated an access, pedestrian access along the edge here. It's a 4-foot wide paved section. The goal was to widen this out a little bit to make this corner safer for pedestrians. A lot of pedestrians walk around this corner along the beach line. So by putting a 4-foot access path that we've pulled off Island Road a little bit, it'll make it a little safer. But the main goal of this is to stabilize Island Road, to elevate Island Road, and to make sure that it's not flooded, since it's the only access way down to Spruce Head Island. So what we've done is we've elevated the road by 3 feet. Well, it's actually about 2.5, 3 feet in some areas. We're trying to balance the increase in elevation, trying to make it so that we're not elevating the road too much, and to accommodate that, we're stabilizing the side slopes with riprap so that the water can come in there. So in the event, so rather than go right to the 4-foot elevation that some have recommended, we can do something in between those two elevations, raise the road up, 2.5, 3 feet, stabilize the edges with heavy riprap so that if in 65 years we do start receiving floods that kind of overtop this section, if we see a 3 or 4 foot rise in sea level, then the road will still be stable, and in those high tide events, it would be stable. The water would come in and then leave. And of course, in all these things, we're trying to plan on some of these unknown factors. So if we try to balance the cost versus risk, the risk here would be that you would be lower than the flood elevation in 100 years potentially, but the savings of cost would benefit that. And by stabilizing the edges, it'll make sure you don't lose all the work that you put into this road area. So in addition to that road elevation change, we've added some drainage. There's some odd drainage that goes on with this light blue line here. There's a drainage pipe that we couldn't find the outlet of. And then this line right here is a new drainage that we bring across the road and then discharge down to the bay where it currently does, just to improve that area, make sure that water can make it across the way. This is a low wetland area through this section that we're trying to stay away from. So we're going to keep the road in its current width, its current location, just sort of raise it up, make a few subtle adjustments, and then armor this. And when I say heavy riprap, you get into 2 foot, 3 foot diameter rocks along the edges to make sure any tide action won't impact that. Our goal is to try to minimize the cost, try to leave, there is a lot of existing riprap along the side currently, and we love to leave that in place and kind of start this next phase of elevation behind that. So we've stabilized the top course of what's there, pull that back, and then kind of put something new down to raise this all up. We're still getting into the details. We just wanted to get the general idea for this section out there. We show the road, when you look over here at the Village Road intersection, we tried to utilize the existing road alignment. There is a house right here in this location that we want to be conscious of. So you can see here's the house area. This is where we're making that realignment. We new alignments right in this section, and it comes down. So we want to tuck some parking. It probably needs to slide down. I think we show it about right here, but I would recommend sliding it down. We're trying to save that tree here, but I think if we impact that tree, we can better improve the visibility of the house lot there, so they're not looking down on this couple of parking spaces. If we slide this down just a little bit, kind of where that trailer and tree are shown, I think that'd be a nice spot to just tuck a couple of cars. It's only be 8 feet wide, just something you could pull over, sit, and then kind of have access to the shore. So that's the north. Yep.
Has anybody discussed that with the residents?
No.
I have not reached out to them directly. I know that we're more than willing to meet with them and kind of go through that with them.
Yeah, this is Owen. I stopped into the Huidonks day before yesterday to just reiterate that this meeting was going on, to make sure that they could watch the YouTube video and offer any comments. This is new to me. I thought that we had previously discussed any sort of potential parking being in that kind of green area that you have, that almost a triangle. And I guess I don't know where the potential parking on that side came from necessarily, because I haven't discussed this with the Huidonks at all.
Yeah, that's definitely something we came up with. I didn't like, after I started trying to fit a couple of parking spaces in this area here, I didn't like the orientation and the close proximity to the Island Road. I didn't like it would potentially be blocking sight lines for people getting in and out of there. So trying to tuck a couple of spaces in there, or even one, became problematic. So our solution was to kind of flip it over on the other side. And again, I'm not happy with this location we show on the schematic. I think I'd like to pull it up closer to that intersection, again, which would put it up in this area, so you could just slide a couple of cars in here. They wouldn't block any sight lines, so you could still pull out and see, and you wouldn't impact any of the pedestrian access along the shoreline here, and be able to green this in, or gravel, however the town wants to handle that. So we're just trying to keep vehicles from blocking that and being able to get in there. You really need about 20 feet to do a parallel parking space, so to get a 20-foot spot in here, it just ended up widening the intersection out, and people would start cutting the corner again. It became a little convoluted. So the parking's up to you guys. If you want to lose it, we can definitely pull it off a plan. We just were trying to, I know that was mentioned at one of the meetings, trying to implement some parking down there, and that was the best spot we found. But again, we can kind of look at that again and try to pull it back into this section and look at some options. But I think you'd have like a straight in and you'd have to back out, and it's definitely a less than ideal situation over there. And of course, we could do something on the side of this road. We could pull it over on Island Road if we wanted to, but putting cars along that road is less than ideal. I'd want a really wide shoulder, a really wide parking space. It's pretty high speed through there, so I'm less than, I don't like that area as much, but it is possible. You do have enough right of way through that section to potentially bump this out and do something along the side of the road if you chose to do that. But we can definitely find potential parking as we get going to the next phase.
Yeah, or not, right? I mean,
Or not, we can eliminate it entirely.
Yeah, so this is a bit of scope creep, but we all participated in it. But I like, I agree with the thought about leaving that grassy area and not parking there, which of course was our original thought. You make a good case about the safety aspect there. So I think the question becomes whether any parking should be part of this plan. So
Yeah, and I'll when we're done here, I have a little bit of time this afternoon. I will definitely go down and try to liaison with the Huidonks and see if they viewed this, because if I just had to speculate, then if that was my property, I wouldn't be overly happy about putting new public parking directly in front of my house. But maybe that's something that they would want for friends and family to come over. So I'll check with them on that.
okay. All right, keep it going, Andrew.
So moving on to the second section, it begins down here. This is the challenging section. There's a substantial amount of ledge through this area. The road is tight. It makes an S-turn. Again, it's also low. The tide comes in there and has the ability to overtop the road, and we want to stabilize that and make sure that doesn't happen and the road is safe. So what we've done in that section is very similar. You know, we did the basic where we raised the road elevation, but on this one, we've made a significant realignment to the road. So right now, what you're looking at is the dashed line here is the existing edge of Island Road, and the green hatch is what we're proposing to eliminate from the original alignment of Island Road. So we're pulling it off right before the Spruce Head Lobster Company, and we pull that. If you're driving down the road, we pull that to the right, to the west, a little bit at the beginning, and then we kind of go right up over that ledge knob, essentially, which is situated right here. This is a pile of ledge. I think I have a couple of photographs here that show what we're looking at. That bring, I can't get them. There it is. So here's that ledge that's the concerning section. This is the Spruce Head Lobster Company there, and we pull the road alignments through where those telephone poles are, over this ledge, to kind of fix that alignment there. So some of the difficulties in its current situation is, as a vehicle makes it around this corner, it's now blinded, so anybody sitting here can't see any vehicles coming from either direction, and the same is true on this side. If your vehicle is over here, or pedestrians, or there's a lot of foot traffic down there, as you can see by the number of cars and lobstermen that use that. You end up with a blind scenario, so the cars come around the corner, and out there with cars kind of meandering back and forth across the center line of the road, it becomes a dangerous situation. So what we'd like to propose is eliminating that and straightening that section out a little bit there, so that the road would, where'd it go? There it is. So that the road would pull off that. It would also provide the Spruce Head Lobster Company with a much larger parking area, so potentially, because we are going to cut into this section, the entrance to the parking lot's right here, and you can see that they do park right up against that section there. So here's the opening. They park right into that area. So kind of overlapping those. Here's the vehicles parking. this is where we're looking that they do sit along here. Here's the grass line, and that goes right here basically, and the cars are sitting in this location. So kind of trading them a little bit of space, taking this area out of their parking lot and adding it to the other side would seemingly give a pretty substantial improvement to their area. You can see, like right now, the road is about 32 feet, apparently 0.3 feet off the building. We propose to kind of push that almost out to 50 feet to give us some room by there, and that would give you an adequate place to park the car, be able to back out before you're actually pulling out onto Island Road. The benefit of this is, in addition to the sight lines, is that elevation, and doing the same thing. We've stabilized the edge of the road with riprap and armoring to make sure it can sit in place. Ideally on this one, we'd like to stay away from the quarry. So the banks seem to be stabilized. The water level in there it seems to be doing fine, but what we'd like to do is come away from the top of that slope so that we can pull the road a little bit away, raise it up, and then stabilize and armor both sides with rock to make sure if the tide does come up in those areas, we're talking 7,500 years down the road, this work wouldn't be washed out entirely. We'd have it armored and protected. And in the short term, it'd get it above those flood elevations that we seem to be seeing more frequently. But this red swath is where we propose to remove the ledge. When they come in and blast this knoll off, we would have them take that out back to about the limit of that section, so that you could be able to see a vehicle the entire length, and you wouldn't run into the situation where the vehicle would be hidden by the ledge. So after doing that, improving the sight lines, you could fix this driveway. I don't know for certain, but the logic in me says that this is what it looks now. Here are the two driveways. I suspect this was the original driveway that was used, but they became frustrated with not being able to see vehicles over the ledge here. So they probably pulled a new entrance down to this section so that when they're trying to get out, they could at least give themselves a running start. It's a short distance from where that ledge is to that point anyways. You're talking 100 feet. So it's not very far to begin with. So at least with the proposed realignment, I think we could, once we get the ledge out of there, we could put that road back to kind of line up in the middle of those two, and when a vehicle is sitting here, they'd be able to see all the way down beyond where they currently can see. Looking at like sight lines now, from here they can see just to that ledge, but they'd be able to see from here all the way clear past the parking lot without that ledge in way, which would make this much safer for not only these landowners up in the back. There's a few houses up here you can see that access this driveway, so it would make it much safer for all these houses, but it'd make it a lot safer for people coming off the bridge in from the other direction, of course. We propose to tie that road back in. So here's the bridge area right here as it goes through the channel. Here's the gravel parking area, so to kind of line those two up here. Here's that gravel parking area. Here's the bridge. So our plan down on that section is right here. So we're going to tie back in essentially right at that parking area. We preserve that, leave that alone. I know that's used pretty regularly. So we preserve that and kind of get everything back in alignment once we get past the quarry there as it comes in. We won't make the driveway impacts along the other side. Essentially, those would just be extended. They'd be pulled out to match the new road. We're pulling things back. The road would be about 10, 15 feet further away from where it currently is. Here's the existing edge of road now. So we pull it away, so it'd only improve those driveways on that side. And it'd give us a little bit of room to make an elevation change there, because these driveways are low. They're at 9 feet, and we're going to be targeting somewhere at 11 and a half. So it would give us a couple extra feet to make a transition down. It wouldn't be a bump. I don't want to alarm any of the abutters there. We'd make a subtle transition. We'd stretch that transition out 50, 60 feet into that driveway to make sure we didn't have an abrupt bump in there. In cases where we could actually raise it up, we would definitely do that as much as we could to blend into the road. So other than going through those, the drainage is pretty straightforward. We picked that up. There's quite a bit of wetlands along here. There's culverts. All those would get adjusted and shifted as needed. Again, getting them to on board, all the landowners of the realignment of the driveway would be helpful. We don't have to. It's not critical to what we're doing. We just think that rather than allowing the two entrances to remain on this location, one would be a simpler approach. This land is owned by the Spruce Head Lobster Company, so they own a big swath along this section. And then there's the right-of-way that kind of runs down through the middle there. It's a pretty old right-of-way, so a lot of it, the rights are a little convoluted, and not being a surveyor, I don't dare to get into their language, but essentially you have the right to the edge of the current road disturbance. So where your edge of your shoulder is, that's where your current road right is for that section through there. So this would all be outside the right-of-way or easement area. We would need to engage the Spruce Head Lobster Company. And the good thing here is, I think, by taking some of the unusable land and giving them a usable parking area, hopefully it would be as simple as swapping those pieces around to give everybody improvements down there. The limit.
Oh, and just I got a quick question, just a couple quick questions. One, I do know that drainage is one of the bigger factors that's led to some of the road degradation. I mean, sightlines, you've addressed that, but can you maybe talk a little bit about how drainage, I know you said it was relatively simple, but how that was going to be addressed for kind of the longer term? And then also, I'd brought up to you some well placements that residents around there had indicated, and if you could just maybe address folks' wells in those areas and how what you proposed anyway, you know, how that would be mitigated so that we don't do damage to wells if we did ledge removal.
Certainly. So to address your first question, the drainage, a lot of these roads that don't have adequate ditching are not elevated enough. Essentially, the fines wash underneath the road as water comes and goes, and it pulls them all into the road base, and it settles in there, and it makes like a clay material underneath the road, so they don't sit well, and then after time, they start plugging up, and they don't drain well. So what we're proposing on both this section and the other section is elevating the road, putting in proper ditching, so that your road, your ditch is basically 18 inches, 2 feet below the road surface elevation. This allows the bulk of your material underneath your road to be able to drain out into your ditch lines rather than get trapped underground, and it prevents water from coming into the side of your road, which you run into when you have a road that's basically flush with the surrounding terrain there. And then we're on top of that, so we have a road gravel that we put in place that'll be free draining material with proper ditching, and then along the edges we're going to armor that with heavy riprap. So it won't be your typical roadside slope. There's going to be heavy riprap, much like what's down along the shoreline here. And what that will do is that'll lock our road base material in. There'll be fabric in between the two to prevent the migration, so that you'll have your fabric preventing your road base gravel from making it out through the coarser, larger riprap. And the larger riprap will prevent the wave action and water associated with some of these extreme high tides from damaging the side of the road, you know, to the best extent we can, that's for sure. Obviously, storm events are pretty wild, and all we can do is our best to estimate what they're going to impact. But we put that large riprap would lock the edge of that road in place, prevent the material from migrating, and still allow the water during normal conditions to drain and free flow out of there so that you can keep your road base in place. Most road failure, especially in Maine, is associated with poor material and migration of fines into the road structure, and then you get that frost thaw, because clay particles under the road, they swell up quite a bit more, they hold water, they swell up, and it causes your road to move around. So your goal is to get free draining material in there that is not subject to freezing, so that those stone sizes don't grow in the winter and the road will stay in the same elevations. It just maintains the road in good condition much longer. And with regards to the blasting is in the well locations. Blasting is always looked at as a scary proposition, but there's quite a bit of technology. They've come a long ways with the blasting procedures. And in close quarters such as this, there's a well right here. This is an approximate well location. So if you look at like the aerial, I believe it's up behind the walkways. It's up in this area somewhere is where the well is. So we're a couple hundred feet, or at least 100 plus feet away from that well there, and the buildings along there. But how they would handle this is they do a lot of shallower drills, and they make the drill holes closer together. Back a number of years ago, before they figured all this out, and to save money, they would drill like 2 holes in here. They put a big explosive in there, and they blow the whole thing up, and you get left with what you're left. Now they do it a little more precisely. They know where the edge of the blasting is going to go, and they basically will drill a number of smaller holes, and there'll be a certain depth. They can reduce the depth. I think the minimum they can do is something in the 4-foot range, but that way they can keep that shallow, they can keep the holes closer together, and then they can use a much smaller charge so it won't shake the house foundations and damage any wells in that area, so they can control it. Before they do their job, there's a number of specific blasting rules and requirements governed by the state of Maine that they would have to follow. It would be a certified blaster that would do this. They have to inventory the houses. A lot of times they come into the houses, they document the foundations, they take pictures, they would document the well location. So it would be on them to make sure they don't impact those things, and their insurance and their procedural components would take care of that and give us that assurance that they wouldn't damage them. But I think the technology has come a long ways, and I've seen them literally blast a hole, 20 feet deep, 5 feet off the face of off a building in a foundation. I've seen them blast a hole, right here, and they haven't damaged the house, or you can feel it in the house, that's for sure, but they haven't damaged anything.
How much of this, which seems new to me, is contemplated in our cost estimate for the project? Basically, our budget for the project.
This was always anticipated in the realignment. We had anticipated that there would be a component of ledge removal to get into some of the stabilization things. So we have anticipated aligning that to an extent. When you do the preliminary and schematic, you're just kind of looking at it from 100 feet away, and you're trying to dial into something to make sure that you have it covered. Then you start doing the design phase, which we're in the schematic design phase, to try to assess where that needs to go, and then you go back to your preliminary and final designs before you can actually start looking at revising construction estimates and kind of putting that in place. So to answer your question, we did look at that. We did anticipate there would be some blasting and ledge removal in those sections. We've got the ledge removal in here. We've kind of lumped this into, an $80,000 number to do a little bit of aggregate, a little bit of ledge removal from that. Granted, that being said, construction prices are very volatile, especially going on right now with everything going on. Some contractors are still really busy. Some are not doing anything right now. So it depends on what you run into. So trying to predict those prices can be a little challenging. But we did anticipate pulling that. Now, we don't have to pull it through that ledge. I mean, let me put that out there. We can leave the road alignment where it currently is. We can simply raise the road up a little bit, but it doesn't solve all the issues we see in this. And I know as engineers, we tend to try to fix everything all in one shot. It doesn't have to. We don't have to do that. We can leave this road alignment in its current location and try to elevate that. It does cause problems adjacent to the lobster company here, because the road will now be a little bit higher than the parking. You're going to be driving down into it. Same thing for this driveway, especially, and we still can't see over the top of the ledge there. So it doesn't fix the alignment situation. So if we're going to be building a road, it's our opinion that you'd get more for your money to be able to put it in the right place, the right location, and the right elevation, because all this road material, all the new paving is still going to have to happen, even if we leave it in the current alignment. So this extra piece, if you will, of removing some ledge and fixing all those things all at once would seem to be well worth your money or investment at this point in time. But again, we don't have to do it to that extent.
So is this weird dichotomy, are you aware that, so the prices of oil are going down, and so when people think about paving, they think that, oh, this is the time to pave. But I've also read that paving asphalt, those prices are going up. As a matter of fact, they're going up significantly. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, it would seem that as oil prices go down, asphalt prices would go down. Essentially, asphalt prices, this is all coming from me in my experience. I can't talk about the whole state of Maine or globally, but what I've seen is asphalt prices kind of hit a low a couple of years ago, and our construction industry has been extremely busy, and everything's been going up. So as they're busy, and just like everything, it's a supply and demand thing. So the oil prices really aren't attached to what we've been seeing in inflation. I think originally when the asphalt prices dropped down to historic lows or recent historic lows, it helped with the asphalt pricing. But now that we got down to the bottom, we've been on a steep incline for asphalt pricing. You can still receive some really competitive asphalt prices. I have seen, when you get into asphalt, I look at it as a price per ton. When I do estimating, I look at somewhere in the $100 to $125 per ton for pricing. So that's based on small projects, and that number fluctuates. So what we've been seeing is when you're doing like a bulk project, you can get prices somewhere in the $80 to $85 a ton. But we've seen that start creeping up because of what's been going on with the construction industry. Ignoring the COVID-19 situation, the contractors have been so busy that they're booked, a year out in advance, 2 years out in advance. So the competitive pricing kind of goes away a little bit. And I think that's really why there's a disconnect between oil prices and that liquid asphalt price and paving price right now.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew.
I had a quick question, and not in specificity as to this project, unless there's some things that you've thought about that might be unique to this. But just generally speaking, and recognizing that this is some proposed plans, what does traffic flow during construction look like? We're proposing this project because of trying to protect the lobster industry out there to Sprucehead Island and make sure that road's always accessible. And so there is a heavy amount of traffic. So as the project would go through its construction phase, generally speaking, how would traffic flow go?
The contractors are used to working on roads, so they know how to manage traffic. They would maintain one lane of access. A lot of the road construction that you see done in locations that you can't reroute traffic, we don't have any way around. We can't utilize other roads. On the Village Road intersection, it gives us a little flexibility there. But for this, I would envision that they would leave one lane open that would be on the existing road. They would work on one lane of the new road and build that up. And basically, they build them in sections. And depending on the length of the section, so they would build the section 100, 200 feet long. They would stay in one lane, build that road section up, and then transition to the other side and then build that road section up. It depends really on the contractor. I've also seen them basically take a road. They would leave this. So if this is the existing road, they would leave one lane in here. They'd be flaggers maintaining it, and they would come down the road and they would build this entire section all the way down through the new project, putting the new material down, making the road elevation, and then they switch traffic back to this section before they started working on the other lane. So they can do it in a number of different ways, whether they break it up into short sections and do, 100, 200 foot section and then switch it to the other lane, or they do the entire linear length. And the paving is the same way. I've seen them pave, a 200 foot section. I've seen them pave a whole lane, 600, 700 feet long before they switch to the other side. It depends on sequencing. I try to stay out of construction sequencing because as soon as I dictate that as the engineer, prices start going up because I'm not doing it or specifying how the contractor wants to do it. So as long as we specify or indicate that we need to maintain accessibility through there at all times for both emergency vehicles and regular travel, both at night through the day, that we can do. And even if they have to put in a set of lights for flagging at night, so they don't have to have somebody there, then we can incorporate that into this project. That's usually where you see a lot of those light systems. They're becoming a lot more readily available. You wheel in those light systems that do the automatic timing and flagging for you. Then you can set something up on a project like this so that they can properly barricade everything, shut one of those lanes down at night, and there won't be any surprises. It'll be still governed by lights. Granted, people won't like it because it's going to be at night, nobody's going to be on the road, and there's going to be a light telling them to stop, but at least there'll be something making sure it's safe.
I got a
My,
quick question. My hand's up.
Yes, Cheryl.
Who will be selecting the lawyer for the deed work? There'll be a boundary line agreements or whatever, deed description and swapping the property. How does that play into the contract?
That would all be from the town. It depends on who you want to acquire and work with. Usually it would be your town attorney who you're familiar with, and then we can work with them as far as putting together plans and schematics to see if they would be receptive to that. I think the first step to this, seeing the impact that we're proposing, would be to sit down with them. I think if we brought them to a select board meeting or did an informal meeting at their convenience, sit down with them. I know there's a lot of people involved in the lobster company there. So if we could sit down with a couple of key members and kind of review this with them first to get their general opinion to see if it's even receptive, and then go on beyond that, it would turn into working with the town attorney. Would be on the town side. We could put together plans, descriptions, whatever the town, the attorney suggested and recommended, and then that could be used working with their attorney to kind of finalize things. So generally, you would put together the description, the easement, the language, and then present it to them as more or less an offer.
Yeah, this kind of project is new to me. So what's the structure? Who's our client? And then who are the children of our client?
As far as for the engagement with the Spruce Head Lobster Company?
No, with the project.
So it is your project. So you are the client, you are the owners of this. So that the town of South Thomaston, this is their road, your road that you control. So you're the ones that you have to look at how you're doing this. As long as any place that we're outside the right of way, anytime we get outside of those standard things like up in this area, then you need to engage the abutters to ensure that you acquire an easement to do any work beyond that. So in this circumstance, you would be looking at, we're trying to stay away from this property, but you're really looking at working with the Spruce Head Lobster Company there, and then the owners for these lots back here. They would need to be coordinated with to do their driveway realignment. Going back to the other section, it's the same thing. This is your right of way that you have roads in. We have proposed nothing is beyond those right of way limits for this one. So even including this parking, right now that right of way line kind of juts up there. You got property lines right here, but it juts up into that property. Here's that corner. You can see that sharp bend right here that coincides with that straight line along that section. So even those property lines, that's all, everything's proposed to be within the right of way. So how we handle that and how we move things around. So if you want to make the road improvements, all you need is the town approval to kind of go through the budgeting process and make sure you can do that. But you don't have to engage, or you shouldn't need easements from any of these landowners that you're not impacting.
Sorry, I asked the question wrong, incorrectly by using the word client. I'm talking about who do I hire to go build the road? As I said, this is new ground for me.
Yeah. So the proper process here would be to so you'd have to, the next step here is to take it obviously after we get everybody at the town review it to make sure that we're on the right path. The next process would be to turn these schematic designs into preliminary designs that would be suitable for both acquiring permits and then taking it to the next level of final designs and construction documents. So once we go through that phase of getting everybody signed off, everybody approved, then you would go out to bid for a contractor. You would package up everything, have construction suitable drawings. You'd have a project manual that would include all the specifications, all the requirements that they have to build it by, all the contracts between the contractor and the town, and that would be sent out to various contractors. We do it a number of different ways. We do an invitation to contractors where you grab the local contractors that are capable of performing these jobs. You know, you get like 3 to 5 of them, and you invite them to work on it, or you can send it out and put it in the paper and send that out and just put a blanket statement out there to everybody, as well as inviting some of the local people, the local contractors, to be able to bid on the project. And then they would give you a bid price. The town would receive the bids. They'd be able to review all the bids, and we'd help you go through all this process to make sure there's no, everything looks fine in there. We'd provide you with a recommendation on who we recommend you award the bid to, and then the town could review it and make a determination on who they do want to award the bid to, and then put it through. So generally we see the bids being opened, reviewed, we accept them all, if you will, or at least log them all, and then the select board would then review those bids, which we can attend and kind of talk you through that and answer any of the questions you might have, and then you could you could award that to one of the contractors that you prefer.
Great, thank you.
Certainly.
And one thing just to throw out there for those folks that have waited through the current, I think like 42 minutes that we've been doing this, the designs and this YouTube video will be on the website. So folks wanting to, you know, look at some of these designs in greater detail and at their own pace will be able to do so. And then the town offices stands ready to receive any emails, phone calls, correspondence with folks' thoughts on these designs. And now that we have kind of a better sense of what the engineers are proposing anyway, we can start gently engaging with some of the landowners just to get their initial thoughts around it. Kind of reiterating, this is the more planning phase. So all of this stuff is tentative, and definitely want to hear from the public on their thoughts.
Okay. Do you have any questions from the cyberspace?
Surprisingly, no. We've had roughly 6 people watching. It's fluctuating between 5 and 6 people watching. I did, while we were on here, pull up some of the other names of folks that had participated in our first public information session that were not necessarily all abutters, but interested parties. And so I kind of am putting together a supplemental list to reach out to some of these folks specifically to make sure that they're aware we've done this so that they can review and provide their thoughts.
Okay. What's next for us?
What's next for us is try to see what public feedback we get, take the feedback from the board itself and your thoughts on this. I would say take a little bit more time. Maybe we try to get together for another workshop at some point next week, and then we relay any thoughts that we have on alterations that we would want to see to Gartley and Dorsey to continue to refine these. And then when we do town meeting, however that looks, we kind of, again, present, this is an ongoing process. But once we get the funding, if and when, then we can really start engaging more in looking at the permitting, getting the surveyors. Oh, and I'll say real quick, we've known that there was a little bit of a blank on some of the mapping that we had on the public right of way. The Island and Village Road portion is very clear. The DOT's map geo very clearly indicates that Island and Village Road portion. We have good public right of way information coming from the bridge back towards the mainland. And then we have information coming into the Lobster Pound portion, but there was a blank spot between those maps. So we will have to get surveyors and check deeds and items like that to clearly define how much we encroach beyond the public right of way.
When the public information session was conducted, was the concept of straightening the road known at that time?
The concept of straightening the road has always been something that's been floated. People have talked about the sight lines on that road. The concern with straightening the road, from what I heard at the public information session and from other folks, has been, it's already kind of known or speculated that folks drive too fast on that road.
We'll drive, yeah, straighten the road and they'll drive fast.
It out, will they drive even faster? Is it a speedway at that point?
Okay. Then people other than I think about such things. The unintended consequence.
So yeah, if there's no other questions, then basically board members review, public review. Please send your thoughts and comments to the town office. We'll compile them and continue to get them out to the board for their review and Gartley and Dorsey. And then we can try to refine these initial designs as we gather public input and it's reviewed a little bit more.
Okay. Agenda item also for our next meeting as well, for sure.
Definitely. Andrew, do you have anything else?
I think that's it. Thank you all for your time, and let me know if anything comes up.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. This was very good, very helpful.
Thank you, Andrew.
You're very welcome.